Jim is researching and working in the field of human rights, and he's involved in the support work regarding Bradley Manning, Julian Assange, and Mr. Snowden. So please welcome Jim Curran.
First, I want to say that I support the campaign to reinvestigate 9/11, and I'm involved with the different groups that, as I've been introduced with, but I've been largely involved with the Irish Civil Rights Association. I'm chairman of the Irish Civil Rights Association, and it's over the years that I have joined up with these other groups. I came to London in 1967, and I joined, the first campaign I was involved in was the anti-Vietnam War campaign. The Irish Civil Rights movement was founded in 1968, and I joined that. And around 1969, the armed struggle started. From the crushing of the civil rights movement, the armed struggle started. And I got involved with that. I was appointed by when the first Republican prisoners of war were sentenced, both in Ireland and here, the Republican movement set up an organisation to look after the welfare of Irish Republican prisoners of war and the families of Irish Republican prisoners of war, and I was elected as chairman of that. There was a small committee here of just 9 people, because we were under the observation of the MI5 and the MI6 and even the Irish security services. So it was a particularly difficult thing to do. But Norway raised the money in America. It came here to bank, and I administered more or less the welfare fund. And I also then got involved with the Palestinian prisoners, the Kurdish prisoners, the Basques, because we Irish had gained the experience, and even the ANC in South Africa. We all joined from one group to another. And then as modern times went on and the peace process came, we Irish who are activists, we have more time to join into other organisations. And I was involved with the extradition campaign way back 40 years ago against Irish freedom fighters. And then in modern times I got involved with the different campaigns for Tala Ashan, Barbara Ahmed, O'Dwyer, McKinnon, Julian Assange, and all the rest of it. So also the campaign for Guantanamo Bay. And I see people here in the audience who I joined with in the anti-war movement, in the Guantanamo Bay campaign, in the campaign for Bradley Manning, the campaign for Snowden, and the campaign for Julian Assange. When we talk about having 9/11 reinvestigated, they try to say that we're all people believing in conspiracy theories. But I will illustrate 3 things that I had experienced personally myself. And one was way back in 1973. And it was discovered that the SAS had been sent to serve in Ireland, or more or less to go and murder people in a shoot-to-kill policy. Now, this became common knowledge amongst journalists and Republicans in Ireland. And I was contacted by the then chairman of the Irish Civil Rights Association in Ireland, Captain Kelly, and he asked me, could I get any publicity for it here in England? So I thought, how can I do it? Because no paper would take any statement about it. So I wrote a letter to Harold Wilson, calling for the immediate withdrawal of all SAS units from Ireland. And I got on the 24 bus in Pimlico, and I went to Whitehall, and I delivered the letter to Downing Street, walked to the door and handed it in. And that was a time you could do that. And the next day I got a letter back, delivered by hand to my house, from the First Lord of the Treasury, Harold Wilson, telling me that there was no truth in the allegation that I was making. So there was an instance where the British Prime Minister had wrote me a deliberate lie. It took several years for the fact that the SAS were serving in Ireland. It took several years for that fact to come out. The second instance I had was I stood for Parliament here in October 1974, and I led 6 candidates in that general election, solely on the Irish issue. In January 1975, the chief of staff of the IRA got elected, and he and the Army Council decided to carry out blanket bombing here in England. Now, I had been a candidate and got a very high profile on my colleagues in that election. So the Irish community was coming under a great deal of attack here, and the Prevention of Terrorism Act had been introduced, and we were a society under siege. And at least the Republicans in the occupied part of Ireland, they could take guns and defend themselves. But we, the Irish community here in England, we had no guns, we had no police, we had no politicians. There was only a few politicians that came to our aid. Ken Livingstone, Jeremy Corbyn, John MacDonald, and a few more. Kevin McNamara. We were here, we were vulnerable. And when I was at a meeting at the Irish Civil Rights Association when an emissary come and told us that they were going to carry out the blanket bombing. So I decided I would do something about it. And I contacted the Secretary of Marilyn Rees, who was the Northern Ireland Secretary at the time, A.R. Williams. And I contacted the Republican movement. And I asked them, would both people appoint someone to resume the ceasefire that had broken down? The ceasefire had broken down. And as a result of the ceasefire broken down, they were going to carry out blanket bombing here. I travelled to Belfast on a shuttle service that was available at the time, and I booked a small room in a hotel, and I arranged for the 2 people to come. And when the 2 people came, they shook hands with each other, and you'd think that they'd known each other for life. They'd never met each other before. And at a certain part in the thing, I decided to leave because I felt that they didn't want me there, that they wanted to discuss something that they didn't want me to be part of. So I left on the condition that they would get the ceasefire going again and that there wouldn't be any blanket bombing here in England. I took a shuttle service and came back to England. And for 3 weeks after that, they kept saying on the television and in the papers that churchmen were trying to get the 2 sides to come together to bring about the ceasefire. So there were 2 instances that I have personally experienced myself where the truth was trying to be suppressed. I only know in the second instance that it was only 3 weeks that they suppressed the truth for. And the third instance was that the former Minister for Posts and Telegraphs in Ireland banned me from Irish television and Irish radio under Section 31 of the Broadcasting Act. So I have personal experience of being silenced in campaigns that I believe. I've always, throughout my life, I've campaigned in a peaceful, lawful, democratic way for what I believe in, but I've illustrated 3 things, how you can try and suppress and stop you, but it hasn't stopped me, because the very fact I'm still speaking here today means that I'm still continuing to campaign for what I believe in, and I hope that this campaign will continue and grow from strength to strength, and anything I can do in influence people in the other different campaigns that I am involved with, I will do everything I can to support it. Thank you.